Hey everyone, Brandon here from TruckSafe. If you're in the oilfield industry, you're well aware of the complexities that come along with oilfield related operations, including the transportation aspects of it. To help account for this, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations offer some specific exemptions tailored for oilfield operations, commonly referred to as oilfield exemptions. These exemptions recognize the unique demands of the oil and gas industry and offer some flexibility to drivers engaged in particular oilfield activities. But those exemptions can be traps if you're not careful. That's what we're tackling in this video, so stay tuned and do us a favor by clicking those like and subscribe buttons below. All right, the federal safety regulations outline two distinct exemptions under Section 395.1D for oilfield operations. First is an 8-day reset of a driver's weekly hours, and the second is a waiting time exemption. Both exemptions are intended to accommodate the unpredictable and demanding nature of oilfield operations, but they apply in different ways and to different types of drivers and vehicles. So let's break them down. Okay, first up is the 8-day period reset exemption, which appears at 49 CFR 395.1D1. This exemption allows drivers transporting quote-unquote oilfield equipment to conclude any 8 consecutive day period with an off-duty period of 24 or more successive hours, effectively resetting their cumulative on-duty time. As you hopefully know, under standard FMCSA hours of service rules, a driver must take 34 consecutive hours off duty to reset their weekly 70-hour limit. The oilfield exemption reduces that consecutive off-duty period to just 24 hours, which provides additional flexibility to oilfield drivers who often operate under tight schedules. To qualify for this exemption, drivers must be operating commercial motor vehicles exclusively for oilfield-related purposes. This includes transporting oilfield equipment, stringing and picking up pipeline pipes, and servicing natural gas and oilfield operations. The regulations themselves don't define the term oilfield equipment for purposes of this particular exemption. However, the FMCSA has published regulatory guidance on the topic in which it states that the term oilfield equipment for purposes of this exemption is broader than the quote-unquote specially constructed commercial motor vehicles referred to in the second oilfield exemption, which I'll discuss shortly. And it may encompass a spectrum of equipment ranging from an entire vehicle to handheld devices. In other words, this 8-day period reset exemption is tied to the nature of the work being performed. If it's oilfield related, then it likely qualifies. But it's essential for drivers and their employers to maintain detailed records to substantiate compliance. If a driver operates his commercial vehicle for a purpose other than oilfield work, then the normal HOS rules apply. To highlight this point, the FMCSA has issued additional guidance in which it states a driver must exclusively transport oilfield equipment or service the field operations of the industry for each 8-day or shorter period before his or her off-duty period of 24 consecutive hours. However, they must be in full compliance with the requirements of the normal rules before driving other commercial motor vehicles not used to service the field operations of the natural gas or oil industry. Now, one of the main benefits of this exemption is that it allows oilfield drivers to return to work sooner than they would under the standard hours of service rules. However, there are several challenges to be aware of. First, improper classification of a driver's activities can lead to violations if they're not genuinely engaged in exempted oilfield work. And second, ensuring that the full 24-hour off-duty period is taken is crucial. If a driver resumes work before the required break is completed, they risk non-compliance and potential penalties. All right, moving on to the next oilfield exemption, sometimes called the waiting time exemption, which is found at 49 CFR 395.1D2. This exemption is another crucial provision designed to accommodate the realities of oilfield operations. Under it, drivers operating quote-unquote specialized oilfield equipment may log waiting time at natural gas or oil well sites as off-duty rather than on-duty not driving, provided they are completely relieved of all responsibilities and obligations while they're waiting. This exemption is particularly significant because oilfield drivers often experience prolonged waiting periods while wells are being prepared or while other equipment is being used. As a preliminary matter, this exemption applies only to drivers of specific types of specialized oilfield equipment. According to FMCSA guidance, this exemption only applies to operators of those commercial motor vehicles that are, number one, specially constructed for use at oil and gas well sites, and number two, for which the operators require extensive training in the operation of the complex equipment in addition to driving the vehicle. The agency goes on to list the following examples of such specialized oil field equipment: heavy coil vehicles, missile trailers, nitrogen pumps, wireline trucks, sand storage trailers, cement pumps, frac pumps, blenders, hydration pumps, and separators. While this list is not exhaustive, it provides a clear indication of the types of equipment covered by this particular exemption. Operators of standard transport trucks or other non-specialized vehicles do not qualify for the wait time exemption. Another critical aspect of using the waiting time exemption correctly is ensuring that drivers are genuinely off-duty during their waiting periods. They must be free to use their time as they wish, without being required to remain on standby or perform any work-related tasks. This requirement is often a point of confusion, as some employers mistakenly believe that a driver can remain in a vehicle or on site without being formally relieved of duty. If a driver is in fact engaged in any work-related activity, including completing paperwork, for example, the waiting time must be logged as on duty, not driving, and would not come under this exemption. Accurate record keeping is essential here when applying for this exemption. Drivers should document arrival and departure times at well sites and maintain logs that clearly indicate when they were relieved of duty. Employers should also provide written policies clarifying to the drivers when and how they are relieved of responsibility during waiting periods to ensure compliance with FMCSA regulations. So to wrap things up here, for oilfield operators and drivers looking to take advantage of these oilfield exemptions, careful planning and documentation are key. Employers should provide thorough training on the specific requirements of 49 CFR Section 395.1D to ensure that their drivers understand when and how they can use these exemptions. It's critical to remember that even if these oilfield exemptions apply to your operations, they are not all-encompassing exemptions, meaning they do not relieve you or your drivers from all aspects of applicable safety regulations. Instead, as we just discussed, they are limited exemptions that provide some narrow relief from certain but not all aspects of the hours of service regulations. For example, drivers who fall under these exemptions are still subject to the substantive hours of service restrictions and the records of duty status requirements. Implementing clear record-keeping procedures and maintaining well-documented logs will help protect both drivers and companies from potential compliance issues. Drivers should also be mindful of the limitations of these exemptions. Just because an exemption exists does not mean it applies to all oilfield-related work, and also does not mean that it's always a great idea to utilize. For example, leveraging a broad exemption and proceeding to allow drivers to work long hours and then drive heavy equipment after the fact can still lead to fatigue-related accidents and litigation exposure. In short, misapplication or abuse of these exemptions can lead to fines, enforcement actions, disruptions to operations, and heightened highway accident exposure, so it's best to limit their use to the greatest extent possible. For even more in-depth information about these types of regulatory topics, be sure to check out our innovative online compliance courses for safety managers and for drivers over at trucksafeacademy.com. Also, if you're looking for an easier way to access and understand the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, check out eRegs, the first app-based digital version of the regulations over at eregs.app. Lastly, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at trucksafe.com/subscribe and follow us on our various social media pages for the latest highway transportation news and analysis. Thanks for watching.